My, he, a focused and reclusive tycoon, haunted by past mistakes and romantic disappointments. She, a woman scarred by pain, his former assistant who hid a pregnancy and raised her son alone, fighting against everything. Forced by circumstances, Olivia returns to Victor's empire as an assistant. He barely recognizes her, but her dedication to her son, whom he sees in passing, and a strange familiarity intrigue him. The truth explodes when Victor, in shock, discovers that the boy is his son, whom he abandoned years ago. Watch this story to the end. You'll be surprised. If you like stories of love, romance, subscribe to this channel, leave your comment. We post videos like this every day. Continuing. The alarm clock rang at 5:30 in the morning, but Olivia Moore had already been awake for 15 minutes, staring at the ceiling of her small apartment in Queens. A tight budget didn't allow for luxuries, but the location made it easy to get to the job interviews that were multiplying on her schedule. At 35, she carried the weight of 6 years raising Ethan alone, and every line on her face told the story of a woman who had learned to be strong out of necessity. "Mommy, can I have chocolate milk today?" Ethan's sleepy voice echoed from the small room they shared. The 6-year-old boy had the most expressive eyes Olivia had ever seen, a feature that always made her smile and at the same time clench her heart with a pang of melancholy that she preferred not to analyze. "Of course, honey. But just a little bit, okay?" Olivia kissed her son's forehead and prepared breakfast with the ingredients left over from the week's grocery run. Today was an important day. The interview at Caldwell Investments could be the opportunity she had been waiting for months. Meanwhile, on the 30th floor of a commercial building on Wall Street, Victor Caldwell finished his second cup of espresso and reviewed the overnight reports. At 39, he had built an empire that impressed even the veterans of the financial market. His routine started at 4 in the morning and ended close to midnight 7 days a week. Employees saw him as a fair but distant boss. Competitors respected and feared him in equal measure. The socialites of Manhattan courted him without success. "Mr. Caldwell, your schedule is confirmed for today. The meeting with the Japanese investors has been moved to 3 in the afternoon, and we have 15 candidates for the senior executive assistant position," informed Marina, his personal secretary, as she organized the documents on the mahogany desk. Victor nodded without looking up from his papers. Assistants came and went in his company. Most couldn't handle the pace. Others were disillusioned by his personality focused exclusively on work. He preferred it that way. Personal relationships were distractions he couldn't afford. He had learned that the hard way. Olivia straightened, her black blazer, the only one she owned in good condition, and checked the address on the crumpled piece of paper again. The Caldwell Investments building was imposing, all mirrored glass, contrasting with the residential buildings around it. She took a deep breath before entering the main hall, where a blonde and impeccably dressed receptionist directed her to the 28th floor. "You're early, which is good. Mr. Caldwell values punctuality," commented the human resources receptionist, a middle-aged woman who exuded efficiency. "Just a warning. He can seem a little direct. Don't take it personally." The elevator rose silently, and Olivia took the opportunity to mentally review her qualifications. Degree in business administration with a specialization in management, fluent in English and Spanish, experience in large multinational corporations. The gap in her resume, corresponding to Ethan's first years of life, was explained as dedication to family projects. It wasn't a lie, just an incomplete truth. Victor was signing contracts when Marina knocked on the door. "Sir, the 11 o'clock candidate has arrived. Olivia Moore." "Send her in," he replied without looking up, focused on the numbers dancing before his eyes. The door opened and Olivia entered, stepping onto the Persian rug that covered part of the marble floor. The office was bigger than her entire apartment, with a panoramic view of the city that took her breath away. Behind the desk, a man with dark hair and impeccable posture finished writing something, oblivious to her presence. "Have a seat, please," Victor said, still without looking up. "I'll be done in a minute." The voice made Olivia freeze. It was impossible. After so many years, after so much suffering, it couldn't be him. Her hands trembled slightly as she settled into the leather chair, and she forced her breathing to remain regular. Victor finally looked up and stared directly at her. For a moment that seemed eternal, time stopped. His eyes, those dark brown eyes that she knew so well, that she saw reflected in Ethan's face every day, met hers. An expression of confusion passed quickly across his face, as if trying to place a distant memory. "Sorry for the delay," he said, his voice slightly hesitant. "You seem familiar. Have we worked together before?" Olivia felt the world spin around her. 6 years of anger, hurt, and lonely struggle rose to her throat like bile. He didn't recognize her completely, but there was something in his eyes, a spark of remembrance that made her realize that this interview would be much more than a simple job search. "Maybe," she replied, surprising herself with the firmness of her own voice. "I'm Olivia Moore, and I'm here for the senior executive assistant position." The interview lasted 40 tense minutes. Victor asked technical questions about Project Way, management and timelines, while Olivia answered with a professional coolness that contrasted with the turmoil of emotions in her chest. He watched her with that penetrating gaze that she knew so well, trying to decipher the puzzle that she represented in his mind. "Your resume has a period of no professional activity," Victor commented, flipping through the papers. 3 years. That's quite a long time in today's market. "Family matters," Olivia replied dryly. "Situations that required full dedication. Now I am completely available to take on new challenges." "Family matters can repeat themselves," he insisted, and there was something in his voice that she couldn't identify. Curiosity? Genuine concern? This position requires full availability, travel, extended hours, weekends when necessary. Olivia raised her chin. "Mr. Caldwell, I can guarantee that my professional dedication will be absolute. There will be no personal interferences." Victor closed the folder with a sharp movement. Her formality bothered him, as did the persistent feeling that there was something important he should remember. "The decision will be communicated by the end of the week." When Olivia left the room, he stood by the window for long minutes, watching the cars below. Marina entered without ceremony, as she always did. "So, did she pass your Ice Queen test?" "There's something about her," Victor murmured more to himself. "Something familiar, but I can't quite place it." "Familiar how? Have you worked together before?" "I don't know. Maybe." He shook his head, annoyed at his own confusion. "Check her references. I want a full report by tomorrow." Olivia left the building with wobbly legs. On the sidewalk, she leaned against the wall and let the tears burn her eyes without shedding them. Victor Caldwell, the man who had disappeared from her life when she needed him most, leaving her pregnant and alone, was now her possible boss. The irony was too cruel to be coincidence. The phone rang. It was Ethan, calling from school. "Mommy," the teacher said, "you're picking me up early today?" "That's right, honey. I have a surprise for you." Olivia forced joy into her voice. "How about we go get ice cream at the beach?" "Really? Awesome! Did you get the job?" Her son's innocent question was like a punch in the stomach. "I don't know yet, Ethan, but let's keep our fingers crossed, okay?" That night, Victor worked, even later than usual, but his mind was divided between the financial reports and the green-eyed woman who had been in his office. There was something in her posture, in the way she held her hands. in the curve of her lips when she forced a professional smile. Like a song you hear in the distance and can't identify, but that awakens memories. Marina left the report on Olivia on his desk the next morning. Excellent education, impeccable references from previous jobs, no negative occurrences. But there were gaps. The gap corresponded exactly to the years in which he had dedicated himself obsessively to the expansion of the company, trying to forget a relationship that had ended abruptly and painfully. "Hire her," he said to Marina, surprising himself, "but I want a 90-day probationary period." "Are you sure?" She seemed a little tense yesterday. Everyone gets tense in interviews. She has the necessary qualifications. What Victor didn't admit was that he needed to understand why this woman bothered him so much. It was more than professional curiosity. It was an almost physical need to solve the mystery she represented. Olivia received the news by phone on Friday afternoon. She would start on Monday. Ethan's joy was contagious, but she felt a weight in her chest. Working with Victor daily would be a constant torture, but she had no choice. The bills were piling up, and Ethan needed stability. "Mommy, are you crying?" Ethan approached, worried. "They're tears of joy, honey. Mommy got a very important job. Are you going to be rich like the parents of that kid Timmy from school?" Olivia laughed despite everything. "Not rich, Ethan, but we're going to be okay. That's what matters." On Sunday, she took her son to the beach. Ethan ran on the sand while she watched, thinking about what Monday would be like. How would she react to seeing him every day? How would she hide the truth about Ethan? And mainly, how would she protect her heart from a man who had already destroyed it once? "Mommy, look!" Ethan pointed to a man playing soccer with a golden retriever a few dozen yards away. "The dog is beautiful." Olivia looked in the direction and felt the blood run cold in her veins. Victor was there, shirtless, playing with a golden retriever. His hair was tousled by the wind, and he was smiling, an expression she hadn't seen on his face during the interview. For a moment, he looked like the man she had fallen in love with years ago. The dog ran towards them, chasing the ball that had been thrown too far. Ethan crouched down to pet the animal, laughing when he was licked on the face. Victor approached, running to retrieve his companion, and stopped abruptly when he saw Olivia. "Sorry, he's very sociable," Victor said, breathless, looking alternately at her and at the boy playing with Zeus. "Olivia, what a coincidence to find you here." "We live in the neighborhood," she replied, trying to keep her voice neutral as she pulled Ethan closer to her. "Ethan, come on, we need to go." But it was too late. Victor was staring at the boy's face, and Olivia saw the exact moment when the realization began to form in his eyes. The same dark brown eyes, the same face shape, the same dimple in his chin when he smiled. "How old are you, champ?" Victor asked, his voice strangely hoarse. 6 years old, Ethan replied proudly. "And how old is your dog, mister?" Victor didn't answer. His eyes met Olivia's, and this time there was much more than confusion in his gaze. There was a silent question, a suspicion that grew like a storm on the horizon. Olivia held Ethan's hand tightly. "We need to go. See you on Monday, Mr. Caldwell." She walked away quickly, but could feel Victor's gaze burning her back. Monday would not only be her first day of work. It would be the beginning of a confrontation that she had tried to avoid for 6 years. Monday arrived with a light rain that blurred the windows of the Caldwell building. Olivia arrived 15 minutes early, wearing her best suit and carrying a leather briefcase that had been a graduation gift, one of the few valuables she still owned. Marina greeted her with a professional smile and led her to a desk on the executive floor. "You will be responsible for Mr. Caldwell's schedule, coordinating meetings, reviewing contracts, and communicating with international clients," Marina explained, handing her a pile of documents. "He likes espresso, without sugar, and hates being Interrupted during calls. Oh, and never schedule appointments before 8 in the morning. Victor arrived at 7:45 as usual, but this time he stopped in front of Olivia's desk. She smelled the masculine perfume he wore, the same as years ago, and forced herself to keep her eyes fixed on the computer screen. "Good morning, Olivia. I hope you had a good weekend," he said, and there was an intensity in his voice that hadn't been there in the interview. "Good morning, Mr. Caldwell. Your schedule is organized. The meeting with Petrobras has been confirmed for 10 o'clock. He didn't move immediately. "About yesterday at the beach." "It was just a coincidence," she interrupted him, finally raising her eyes. "You don't need to worry about awkwardness. I keep my personal life completely separate from work." Victor studied her face for long seconds. "Your son, Ethan, isn't it? He looks a lot like someone I know." Olivia's heart leaped, but she kept her expression neutral. "He's 6 years old. Children that age look like a lot of people." 6 years old, Victor repeated slowly, as if calculating, something in his mind. "Born when exactly?" "Mr. Caldwell," Olivia stood up, pretending to need to fetch a file. "I believe personal matters are not relevant to our professional relationship." But Victor had already walked away, entering his office with a thoughtful look that she knew well. It was the same look he had when solving complex business problems. Only now, the problem was her. The following days established a tense routine. Olivia proved impeccably professional, anticipating Victor's needs before he even verbalized them. She organized his chaotic schedule, renegotiated contracts with suppliers in fluent English, and coordinated a video conference with Japanese investors, with an efficiency that impressed even Marina. Victor, in turn, found excuses to prolong work conversations. During a review of financial reports, he commented, "You have a very particular way of organizing spreadsheets. Reminds me of someone I knew years ago." "I learned this method in college," Olivia replied without looking up. "It's a common technique. At NYU, wasn't it?" She froze. He was investigating her past. "Yes. I graduated in 2010. I gave some lectures there around that time, about entrepreneurship and the stock market." Victor approached the desk where she was working. "Did you attend any?" Olivia remembered perfectly. It was at one of those lectures that they had met. She was a brilliant senior student, interning at a smaller company, and he was the young, successful businessman who spoke about innovation and calculated risks. After the lecture, she had asked an intelligent question about mergers and acquisitions, and Victor had invited her for coffee. "I don't remember," she lied. "There were many lectures throughout the course." Victor knew she was lying. He could see it in the small contractions around her eyes, in the way her hands moved nervously over the keyboard. But there was something more, a familiarity in the way she anticipated his needs, as if she had worked with him before. On Thursday, Ethan called in the middle of the afternoon. Olivia answered discreetly, turning to the wall. "Mommy, the teacher wants to talk to you. Tomorrow." About the Father's Day presentation, Olivia's heart ached. Father's Day was always a difficult time for Ethan. "Okay, honey, we'll talk at home." She hung up and turned around, finding Victor standing a few feet away, clearly having overheard part of the conversation. "Everything okay?" he asked, and there was a genuine kindness in his voice that caught her off guard. "Yes, just school issues." "It must be difficult," Victor commented, sitting in the chair next to her desk. "Raising a child alone." Olivia stared directly at him for the first time in days. "Why did you assume I raised my son alone? You don't wear a ring, you never mention a husband or boyfriend, and..." Victor hesitated, as if deciding whether he should continue. "And the way your son looked at me on the beach, as if he were looking for something, I recognize that look." "Recognize it from where?" The question came out more abruptly than she intended. Victor was silent for a moment. When he spoke, His voice was low, almost vulnerable. "I also grew up without a father. My mother raised my brother and me alone after my father abandoned us when I was 8 years old. I know what that look is like, from a child who wonders why he doesn't have a present father." Olivia felt something move in her chest, a crack in the ice wall she had built around her heart. "I didn't know you had a brother." "I had," Victor corrected, and the pain in his voice was palpable. "Mark died in a car accident 10 years ago. He was coming back from a graduation party, driving the car I'd given him as a gift. If I hadn't insisted that he accept the car..." He stopped abruptly, as if he had revealed more than he intended. Olivia vaguely remembered Victor mentioning a younger brother years ago, but he had never talked about his death. "I'm sorry," she said softly. It couldn't have been easy to deal with the guilt. Victor looked at her in surprise. "How do you know about the guilt?" "Because I know that look too," Olivia replied. "The look of someone carrying a weight they shouldn't carry alone." For a moment, something passed between them. A connection that went beyond sexual tension, beyond repressed anger. It was a mutual recognition of two people who had suffered deep losses and had learned to hide the pain behind masks of strength and control. The phone rang, breaking the moment. It was the reception desk, announcing the arrival of the German clients for the 3 o'clock meeting. "I need to go," Victor stood up, quickly recomposing the professional mask. You do an excellent job, Olivia. It's good to have someone competent around." When he left, Olivia stared at the closed door. For the first time in 6 years, she had seen a glimpse of Victor's vulnerability, of the man he hid behind the successful CEO. And despite all her anger and hurt, a part of her, a part that she thought she had buried forever, still cared about his pain. It was a dangerous feeling, because Olivia knew that if she started to care about Victor Caldwell again, the truth about Ethan would become impossible to hide. And when the truth came out, none of them would get away unscathed. Friday started with a downpour that turned the streets into rivers. Olivia arrived soaked at the office, even with an umbrella, and found Victor already in his office, talking on the phone in English with American investors. His voice was tense, and she realized from the abrupt gestures that something was wrong. "No, you don't understand. We need this approval today, or the whole project falls apart," Victor spoke, running his hand through his hair. 6 months of work can't go down the drain because of red tape. Olivia prepared his sugar-free coffee and left it discreetly on the table. Victor nodded gratefully, but continued the increasingly heated call. When he finally hung up, he slammed the phone on the table forcefully. "Trouble?" Olivia asked, returning to the room with the reports he had requested. "The Americans are backing out of the merger agreement. Apparently, someone leaked information about our financial situation in São Paulo, and now they think we're a risky investment." Victor stood up and went to the window. 500 jobs depend on this deal, Olivia, including yours." She approached and placed the documents on the table. "Is there any way around this?" "Maybe. If I can get to New York by Monday and personally present the real numbers, I can save them from paranoia." Victor checked his watch. "But my flight doesn't leave until Sunday night, and they want an emergency meeting tomorrow morning." "Or what if we could get a flight today?" Olivia suggested. "I can call the corporate travel agency." "I already tried. There's nothing available. The storm cancelled half the flights." Olivia thought quickly. "I have a contact in executive aviation, a client from the company where I worked before. He owes me a few favors." Victor looked at her with interest. "You could manage that?" "I can try." She was already dialing the number of Fernando, a pilot and owner of a small private jet company. After a 10-minute conversation in which she mentioned old times and called in some favors, she hung up with a shy smile. 8 o'clock tonight, Teterboro Airport, direct flight to New York." "Olivia, you're an angel." Victor said, and for a moment forgot all the tension between them. I don't know how to thank you. Just by saving those jobs, she replied. The company phone rang. It was Ethan's school. Mrs. Moore, this is Principal Thompson. Ethan had a bad spell during recess. He had an asthma attack and is in the nurse's office. It's not serious, but we need you to come pick him up. Olivia's world collapsed. I'm going now. Keep him calm, please. She hung up with trembling hands. Victor was watching her panicked expression. What happened? My son. He had an asthma attack at school. I need to pick him up. Olivia was already grabbing her purse, but stopped. Victor's flight depended on her organization. The documents, the contracts, the presentation, everything needed to be ready. But the trip... Go get your son, Victor said without hesitation. This can wait. It can't. Olivia was torn between maternal despair and professional responsibility. It's 500 jobs, Victor. And Fernando only got that time because I asked him personally, if we cancel. Victor approached and placed his hands on her shoulders. Olivia, listen. Your son comes first, always. I can't lose this job, she whispered, and tears began to form in her eyes. Ethan needs stability, health insurance. You won't lose your job. Victor grabbed his keys from the table. Where's the school? Upper East Side, but let's go together. You take care of Ethan, I'll drive, and we'll figure out a solution on the way. During the drive, with Victor driving his BMW through the traffic jams caused by the rain, Olivia called Fernando and reorganized the entire flight logistics. She coordinated with Marina to print the documents, scheduled contingency meetings, and sent emails to the American clients, all while trying to control her anxiety about Ethan's condition. Do you have children? She asked in a moment of silence. No, Victor replied, focused on the traffic. I never allowed myself that vulnerability. Vulnerability? To love someone more than your own life. To have something that matters, more than any business, any achievement. He glanced at her. It must be both the scariest and most rewarding thing in the world. Olivia studied him as he drove. There was a melancholy in his voice that she recognized. You never wanted to have a family. Victor was silent for so long that she thought he wasn't going to answer. I once did, many years ago, but I made mistakes that hurt people who didn't deserve to be hurt. Since then, I've decided that some people aren't made for domestic happiness. They arrived at the school as the rain was subsiding. Ethan was in the nurse's office, pale but breathing normally. When he saw Olivia, his eyes lit up. Mommy, the nurse said you would come pick me up. Olivia hugged him tightly, checking his breathing and temperature. Are you feeling better, honey? Uh-huh. It was just a little hard to breathe when I ran too much. Ethan then noticed Victor standing in the doorway. Hi, doggy man. Victor approached hesitantly. Hi, champ, are you feeling better? Much better. Did you bring my mommy? Ethan asked with a confidence that surprised Olivia. Actually, your mommy brought me. Victor smiled, and Olivia felt something stir in her chest as she saw the genuine kindness with which he treated Ethan. The nurse explained that it had been a mild crisis, probably caused by the humid weather and the excitement of recess. Ethan could go home, but he should rest over the weekend. When they left the school, Victor offered, I can take you home and then go straight to the airport. You don't have to. We can get a cab. Mommy, I liked the doggy man, Ethan commented, still holding Olivia's hand. He has eyes just like mine. The silence that followed was deafening. Victor stopped walking and looked directly at Ethan, then at Olivia. This time, there was no doubt in his gaze. There was certainty, shock, and a growing understanding that would change everything. Olivia, he said, his voice hoarse, we need to talk. Not here, she replied quickly, pulling Ethan closer. Not now. When I get back from New York, then. Promise me you won't disappear. Olivia stared at him, seeing in Victor's eyes the Same intensity she had seen years ago when they fell in love. But now there was something more. There was suspicion, fear, and a determination that she knew was dangerous. "I'm not going anywhere," she whispered. Victor got into the car and drove off to the airport, leaving Olivia on the sidewalk with Ethan. As the car disappeared into traffic, she knew that when he returned, the truth she had hidden for 6 years would finally come to light. And none of the three would emerge from this revelation without deep scars. Victor returned from New York on Tuesday with the deal saved, but his mind was completely focused on the conversation he needed to have with Olivia. During the 3 days away, he had calculated and recalculated the dates, revisited memories he had tried to bury for years. Ethan was born exactly 9 months after his relationship with a brilliant and passionate young intern. A woman he had cowardly abandoned when he realized he was falling too hard, when the fear of becoming vulnerable like his mother had been made him flee. Olivia was organizing documents when he arrived at the office. She looked up and he could see that she hadn't slept well either. "How was the trip?" she asked, trying to maintain normalcy. "Successful. The jobs are saved." Victor closed the office door. "Olivia, I need to ask you a question, and I want an honest answer." She stood up, her hands trembling slightly. "Victor, is Ethan my son?" The silence stretched for long seconds. Olivia closed her eyes, and when she opened them again, there were tears in them. "Yes." Victor felt like he had been punched in the gut. "Why didn't you ever tell me?" "You disappeared." Olivia's voice rose, filled with years of hurt. 1 week. We were making plans, talking about the future, and the next, you simply vanished. Changed your number, didn't answer emails. When I found out I was pregnant, you had already become unreachable. "I was scared," Victor admitted, running his hands over his face. "Scared of becoming like my father, of abandoning you when things got tough. I thought I was protecting you." "Protecting me?" Olivia laughed bitterly. "I lost my job when the pregnancy started to show. I had to move to a tiny apartment in Queens. I went hungry so Ethan would have milk. Where was your protection when I needed it?" Victor approached, but she recoiled. "Olivia, I didn't know." "Of course you didn't know, because you ran away before giving me the chance to tell you." The door opened abruptly. Marina entered without knocking, something she never did. "Victor, sorry to interrupt, but we have a problem." She stopped when she saw the tension in the room. "Are you arguing?" "What is it, Marina?" Victor asked, forcing his voice to remain professional. "I received a strange call. A reporter from Forbes asking about your personal life, about a possible, undisclosed paternity." Olivia's blood ran cold. "How did they find out?" "I don't know," Marina replied, looking between the two. "But he specifically mentioned your name, Olivia, and talked about a 6-year-old boy." Victor sat down heavily in his chair. "Someone is investigating our lives." The office phone rang. Marina answered, and her expression became even more grave. "Victor, it's for you, Richard Sterling." Richard Sterling was Victor's main competitor in the investment market, a man known for his unscrupulousness and for using personal information against business adversaries. "Caldwell," Victor answered dryly. "Victor, my friend, I heard you've had some family surprises recently." Richard's oily voice echoed through the speakerphone. "What are you talking about?" "Oh, you know very well. A son that nobody knew existed. That can be very damaging to the image of a respectable CEO, don't you think? Especially when it involves an employee." Victor exchanged a tense look with Olivia. "What do you want, Richard?" "Nothing much. Just that you give up the bid for the Deepwater Horizon oil rig, withdraw your proposal, and let more stable companies take on projects of that magnitude." "And if I don't do that?" "Well, it would be a shame if the press found out that the great Victor Caldwell abandons pregnant women and then hires them as employees. People love That kind of story of abuse of power, your reputation, your investors, your company, everything can collapse very quickly. Victor hung up the phone forcefully. Son of a bitch. Victor, Olivia said, her voice trembling. I can leave the company. I can disappear with Ethan. You don't need to lose your business because of us. You're not going anywhere. Victor stood up with determination. Ethan is my son. I'm not going to abandon him again. Marina, who had heard the whole conversation, approached. Victor, maybe we can control the damage. An official statement, assuming paternity in a positive way. It won't work. Victor shook his head. Richard has contacts in the press. He'll distort any story we tell. Olivia's phone rang. It was from Ethan's school. Mrs. Moore, we've had some visitors here today. Reporters asking questions about Ethan. We're concerned and would like you to come pick him up early. Olivia hung up in a panic. They went to Ethan's school. Victor felt a fury that he hadn't experienced in years. No one is going to use my son as a weapon. Your son? Olivia stared at him. Now he's your son? Where was that paternal concern? For the last 6 years, I was being a coward, Victor admitted. But now I know the truth, and I'm going to fight for you both. We don't need you to fight for us, Olivia replied, grabbing her purse. We needed you 6 years ago. Now it's too late. She left the room, leaving Victor alone with Marina and the weight of his past choices. Outside, photographers were already gathering at the entrance of the building. The news was spreading, and there was no turning back. That night, the first story was published online. Millionaire CEO hides illegitimate son and hires the mother as an employee. The photo of Olivia leaving school with Ethan was plastered on the homepage of the country's most read gossip site. Victor, alone in his penthouse apartment, looked at the city through the panoramic window. In 6 years, he had built an empire, but in one day, he had discovered that his greatest achievement and his greatest regret were the same thing. Having lost the chance to be a father from day one. And now, perhaps it was too late to recover what he had lost. Olivia was right. She and Ethan had survived without him for 6 years. Why would they need him now, when his presence only brought scandal and pain? The phone rang. It was Marina. Victor, you need to see tomorrow's newspaper. Richard got an exclusive interview. He's painting you as a predator who takes advantage of vulnerable employees. Victor closed his eyes. The war had only just begun, and the two people who mattered most to him were in the middle of the battlefield. Thursday morning began with Olivia finding a crowd of reporters at the door of her building. Flashes went off when she left with Ethan to take him to school, and the shouted questions made her cover her son's face with her coat. Is it true that you plan to get pregnant to blackmail Victor Caldwell? How much money are you asking to keep quiet? How does it feel to be called a gold digger? Ethan clung to his mother's skirt, frightened by the commotion. Mommy, why are those people shouting? Olivia managed to get to the car she had called, but the images were already being broadcast live on morning shows. On the way to school, her phone wouldn't stop ringing. Unknown numbers, probably more journalists. At Caldwell Investments, the situation was no better. Victor arrived at the office to find security guards blocking the entrance and a small crowd of reporters. Marina intercepted him in the private elevator. 3 investors have already cancelled meetings this week. The board of directors has scheduled an emergency session for this afternoon, and there's something else. Marina hesitated. Richard Sterling obtained a court order questioning your ability to manage the company during this moral crisis. Victor entered his office and found the morning editions of the newspapers on his desk. The headlines were devastating. CEO abandons pregnant woman and then hires her. The business predator. Empire built on lies. When Olivia arrived at the office an hour later, she was greeted by curious glances and whispers from other employees. She kept her head up and walked to her desk, but found a letter of resignation waiting for her. "What's this?" she asked. "Marina, orders from the board. They think your presence is complicating the situation." Victor came out of his office at that moment. "Marina, cancel that resignation immediately." "I can't, Victor. The decision came directly from the chairman of the board." The reception phone rang. It was Ethan's school. Again. "Mrs. Moore, I need to ask you to withdraw Ethan from classes for the rest of the week. The reporters are disturbing the other children, and some parents are complaining. We understand it's not your fault, but..." Olivia hung up with tears in her eyes. "They kicked my son out of school." Victor approached, but she moved away. "Don't come near me. You brought this into our lives." "Olivia, I can fix..." "How?" she exploded. "How are you going to fix it? Are you going to make the newspapers stop printing lies? Are you going to make people stop calling me a gold digger? Are you going to give my son back his normal childhood?" Marina approached hesitantly. "Victor, your mother is on the line. She saw the news." Victor answered the phone reluctantly. Helena Caldwell's voice echoed through the speakerphone, cold as ice. "Victor, I hope you understand the gravity of the situation. Our family has always maintained an impeccable reputation. This situation is tarnishing the Caldwell name." "Mom, he's my son. Ethan is your grandson." "An illegitimate grandson, raised by a woman who clearly planned this to benefit herself. Victor, you need to distance yourself from this situation before it destroys everything we've built." Olivia heard every word and felt like she had been slapped. She grabbed her personal belongings from the desk and headed for the elevator. "Where are you going?" Victor asked, following her. "Away from you, away from all this madness you brought into our lives. Olivia, don't do this. Don't abandon us again." She turned to him, her eyes shining with tears and anger. "I abandoned you? Me? Do you have the nerve to say that after disappearing from my life when I needed you most?" The elevator arrived full of employees who remained in embarrassed silence. Olivia entered, and before the doors closed, said the last thing Victor expected to hear. "Ethan will never know you as a father. Not after what you did to us. Not after turning our lives into a circus." The doors closed, and Victor stood in the hallway, feeling the gaze of all the employees on him. 2 hours later, Victor was in the meeting with the board of directors. The 6 senior members of the company were seated around the conference table, and their expressions were grim. "Victor," began Mr. Abernathy, the chairman of the board, "in 20 years of partnership, we have never questioned your personal decisions, but this situation is directly affecting business. 2 international clients have cancelled contracts this morning," added another member. "The company's stock has fallen 12%. And Richard Sterling is using this situation to question your moral fitness in several public tenders," completed Mr. Abernathy. Victor looked around the table, seeing men he had known for years who had built the company with him, now seeing him as a risk. "Gentlemen, I have made mistakes in the past, but Ethan is my son, and Olivia did nothing wrong. She was a victim of my decisions." "Victor," Mr. Abernathy leaned forward, "the board has decided that you need to temporarily step down from the presidency of the company until this situation is resolved." The silence was deafening. Victor had built that company from scratch, and now he was being removed for being a father. "And if I refuse, then we will be forced to call an extraordinary meeting of shareholders, and with the current situation in the press..." Mr. Abernathy didn't need to finish the sentence. That night, Victor drove aimlessly through the streets of New York. He had lost the company, lost Olivia again, and now he discovered that he had a son who might never accept him as a father. When he finally stopped the car, he was in front of the building where Olivia lived. The lights in her apartment were on, and he could see shadows moving behind the curtains. Ethan was there, probably wondering why all this confusion was happening. Victor picked up the phone and dialed Olivia's number. She answered on the fifth ring. "What do you want?" "I want to apologize. I want to try to fix this." "It's too late, Victor. You've destroyed our lives twice. There won't be a third." "Olivia, please, don't call me anymore. Don't come after us. Ethan and I are leaving New York to a place where no one knows us, where he can grow up in peace." The call was cut off. Victor stood in the car, looking at the building, knowing that within those walls was the only thing that really mattered in his life, and he had lost everything for cowardice, pride, and fear. In the apartment, Olivia packed the few clothes they owned into an old suitcase. Ethan was sitting on the bed, holding his teddy bear. "Mommy, why are we packing? Are we going on a trip?" Olivia knelt in front of her son, trying to find words that a 6-year-old could understand. "We're going to live somewhere else, honey, a quieter place." "And Uncle Victor, isn't he coming with us?" Olivia's heart broke a little more. "No, Ethan, he's not coming. But I liked him, and he has eyes just like mine." Olivia hugged her son tightly, knowing that she was depriving him of knowing his father, but also knowing that it was the only way to protect him from the circus that their lives had become. Outside, Victor remained in the car, watching the lights go out one by one. When the last window went dark, he knew that he had lost forever the chance to be the father Ethan deserved and the man Olivia had once loved. Everything was lost. Olivia spent 3 days at home with Ethan, watching him repeatedly ask why he couldn't go to school anymore, why the curtains needed to stay closed, and why Mommy cried when she thought he wasn't looking. On Sunday morning, as she prepared coffee and planned the move to Boston, where an old college colleague had offered help, her phone rang. "Olivia, it's Marina from Caldwell Investments." "Marina, I don't work there anymore." "I know. But I need to talk to you. It's important about what's happening to you both." Olivia hesitated. "I don't know if..." "Olivia, I've worked for Victor for 5 years. I know his every move, every deal, every enemy. What's happening isn't a coincidence. Someone planned this." An hour later, Marina was sitting in Olivia's small living room with Ethan playing in the next room. Marina opened a folder full of documents. It all started with the Deepwater Horizon oil rig bid. It's a $2 billion contract. Richard Sterling always knew Victor would win the bid. Our proposal was far superior. But 3 weeks ago, he started investigating Victor's personal life. "How do you know this?" Olivia asked. "Because he tried to bribe me, offered $50,000 for compromising information about Victor. When I refused, he said he would find other ways." Marina showed photos taken with a cell phone. "These are the private investigators Richard hired. They were following you and Ethan for 2 weeks. Olivia looked at the photos with horror. There were images of Ethan at school, of her leaving the supermarket, even of the chance meeting on the beach with Victor. "He planned everything," Marina continued. "The leak to the press, the photos, even the distorted story in the newspaper. Richard has a journalist in his pocket for years. But why? Why destroy our lives just for a contract?" Marina picked up another document. "Because it's not just a contract. Richard is in debt. His company owes $120 million to banks. If he doesn't get the oil rig bid, he'll go bankrupt, and he knows that Victor would never give up because of common blackmail. So he had to create a public scandal." Olivia completed the reasoning. "Exactly. He bet that Victor would choose the company over family, that you would be abandoned again." Olivia felt a mixture of anger and sadness. And he was right. Victor chose not to fight. "Olivia," Marina leaned forward, Victor lost the presidency of the company yesterday. The board removed him. He's alone, trying to find a way to prove that Richard set all this up. It's not my problem, Olivia said, but her voice didn't sound convincing even to herself. Ethan, come here for a second, Marina called the boy, who appeared at the door holding a toy car. Ethan, do you want to meet your daddy? Marina asked directly. Olivia stood up abruptly. Marina! I have a daddy, Ethan asked, his eyes shining. Where is he? He's trying to protect you and your mommy from bad people, Marina replied, ignoring Olivia's furious look. But he needs help. Would you like to help your daddy? Ethan nodded energetically. I can. I'm strong. Marina looked at Olivia. Richard made a mistake. He wasn't counting on one thing. What? That you were a fighter. That you had evidence. What evidence? Marina smiled for the first time. Olivia, you worked at the company where Richard made the first contacts with the investigators. You have access to the email systems there. If we can prove that he planned this defamation campaign, it would be a crime. Slander, defamation, use of false information to harm public competition. Exactly. And Richard would go to jail, not just lose the bid. Olivia was silent for long minutes, processing everything. Why are you telling me this? Why didn't you go straight to Victor? Because Victor is destroyed. He believes you are better off without him. He's considering selling his share of the company and disappearing. Marina paused. And because you are the only person who can prove his innocence, you have the connections, you have access to the systems, and you have what Richard fears most. What? The truth, and a son that Victor finally wants to know. Ethan approached Olivia. Mummy, can I help my daddy? Please. Olivia looked at her son, seeing in him the determination that she herself had developed over the years. She thought of Victor, alone and defeated, believing that he had lost everything for cowardice. She thought of Richard, laughing somewhere, thinking he had won. Marina, she said finally, I need you to make some calls. That night, Olivia was in front of the computer at her old company, where she still had access for 3 more days as a professional courtesy. Fernanda, her former colleague, had left the building open especially for her. Are you sure you want to do this? Fernanda asked. If they find out, they won't find out. And if they do, I'll be proving that I'm innocent of something. They accused me of unfairly. Olivia typed her old passwords and prayed they would still work. They did. In 2 hours of meticulous searching, she found what she was looking for. Emails from Richard to the private investigator, bank transfers, even recordings of phone conversations he had made to protect himself if something went wrong. At 3 in the morning, she had a complete folder with evidence of the conspiracy. Richard had not only orchestrated the scandal, he had lied about the finances of his own company to get investments, had bribed journalists, and even threatened witnesses. Olivia printed everything, made digital copies, and sent them to 3 different emails as security. When she left the building, the sun was rising and she knew that the war was only just beginning. But this time, she wouldn't fight alone. And this time, she would fight not only for Ethan, but also for the man she had learned to love twice in her life. Once as the naive young woman who believed in happy endings, and now as the strong woman who knew that sometimes you have to fight for happy endings. Victor didn't know yet, but his salvation was coming, and it had the name of Olivia Moore and 6 years of accumulated anger to fuel her determination. Marina's phone rang at 6 in the morning. Marina, it's Olivia. I did it. I have everything. Now you need to tell me where to find Victor. We have a scandal to expose. Victor was in his penthouse apartment on Monday morning, signing the papers that would transfer his shares of the company to Marina and other trusted employees when the doorbell rang. He hesitated before answering. In recent days, only reporters had looked for him. When he opened the door, Olivia was standing there with Ethan by her side, holding a folder of documents and a determination in her eyes that he hadn't seen for years. "We need to talk," she said, entering without waiting for an invitation. Ethan looked around the luxurious apartment with curiosity, but his eyes soon fixed on Victor. "Are you my real daddy?" Victor knelt down to the boy's level, feeling the tears burn his eyes. "Yes, Ethan, I am." "Why did it take you so long to meet me?" A child's simple and direct question was more painful than any accusation Victor had ever received. "Because I was a coward, son. Because I was afraid I wouldn't be a good father to you. But now you're not afraid anymore." Victor looked at Olivia, then back at Ethan. "Now I'm more afraid of not trying to be your father than of trying and failing." Olivia placed the folder on the coffee table. "Victor, sit down. You need to see this." For the next 20 minutes, she presented all the evidence she had collected. Emails from Richard planning the defamation campaign, payments to private investigators, phone recordings where he admitted to setting up a scandal to destroy Victor. There was even evidence that Richard had falsified his own company's financial documents to get investments. "My God," Victor murmured, flipping through the papers. "He planned all this. From the beginning, the only thing he didn't expect was that I would fight back." Victor raised his eyes to her. "Why are you doing this? Why are you helping me after everything that's happened?" Olivia looked at Ethan, who was exploring the apartment, and then back at Victor. "Because I realized something in the last few days. You may have been a coward 6 years ago. You may have abandoned me when I needed you most, but when you found out about Ethan, you didn't run. You were willing to lose your company, your reputation, everything to take responsibility. And that's exactly what happened. I lost everything." "No," Olivia shook her head. "You didn't lose. Because now we're going to get back everything that's ours." Olivia's plan was simple but effective. At 2 in the afternoon, she called the reporter from Forbes who had started all the sensationalist coverage. This time, she had an irresistible proposal, an exclusive interview with evidence that a businessman had orchestrated a fake scandal to destroy a competitor. "Richard Sterling is going to grant me an interview at 4 in the afternoon in his office," she explained to Victor. "He thinks I'm going to confess that I set everything up to blackmail you. What he doesn't know is that we're going to record everything. Olivia, that's dangerous. If he finds out, he won't find out because you're going to be there too." At 4 in the afternoon, Richard received Olivia in his office, with the arrogant smile of someone who believes he has won. 2 journalists were present, as well as a lawyer. "So, Mrs. Moore," Richard began, leaning back in his leather chair, "have you come to confess that you planned to get pregnant by Victor Caldwell to get money?" "Actually, I came to confess something different," Olivia replied calmly. "I came to confess that I discovered who really planned all this." She opened the folder and began to place the documents on the table, the emails, the bank transfers, the recordings. Richard's smile gradually disappeared. "Where did you get this?" he asked, his voice no longer so confident. "In places where you were careless enough to leave traces." Olivia activated the discreet recorder in her bag. "Tell me, Mr. Sterling, how much exactly did you pay the private investigator?" I don't know what you're talking about." $50,000. It's here in the bank transfer, dated March 15th, exactly 3 days before the first reporters appeared at my son's school. At that moment, Victor entered the room, accompanied by 2 FBI investigators and a prosecutor from the district attorney's office. Richard stood up abruptly. "What does this mean?" "It means you're under arrest," said the investigator, "for conspiracy to harm public bidding, slander, defamation, and use of false information for commercial purposes." The journalists quickly shifted the focus of their cameras and questions. The story of the day would no longer be about Victor Caldwell and an alleged scandal, but about Richard Sterling and a proven crime. 2 hours later, Olivia, Victor, and Ethan were on the beach where everything had begun to unravel. Zeus, Victor's golden retriever, ran on the sand with Ethan, who laughed gleefully every time the dog licked his face. "Is the company going to accept me back?" Victor asked. "Marina has already called. The board of directors has scheduled an emergency meeting for tomorrow. With Richard arrested and the evidence proving your innocence, they want you back immediately." Victor watched. "Ethan play. And us? What happens to us?" Olivia was silent for a moment. "That depends on you, Victor. 6 years ago, you ran away because you were afraid. Today, are you willing to stay? I'm willing to do anything for you both. Anything. Even if it's difficult. Even if Ethan throws tantrums, that I have bad days, that it's more complicated than managing a company." Victor approached her, taking her hands. "Olivia, I spent 6 years building a business empire, but it was only in the last few days that I discovered what's really worth building. A family, a home, a true love. And you're sure that's what you want? Because this time, if you run, there won't be a third chance." Victor knelt on the sand in front of Olivia, taking a small box from his pocket. "Then I better make sure I don't want to run ever again." "Victor, what?" "Marry me, Olivia. Not because we have a son together, not because we went through all this madness together, but because I love you. Because I loved you 6 years ago and was too cowardly to admit it. Because I love you today and I want to spend the rest of my life proving that I deserve your love." Olivia looked at the ring, then at Victor kneeling on the sand, then at Ethan, who had stopped playing and was watching them with curiosity. "Is Daddy going to live with us?" Ethan asked, approaching. "If your mother says yes," Victor replied. Ethan looked at Olivia expectantly. "Say yes, Mommy, please." Olivia laughed through her tears. "You two planned this, didn't you?" "Maybe," Victor admitted, smiling. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I accept. I accept to marry you. I accept to build a family with you. I accept to give you the chance to be the man and the father that I always knew you could be." Victor put the ring on her finger and kissed her, while Ethan shouted with joy, and Zeus embarked, running in circles around the three. 6 months later, at St. Patrick's Cathedral, Olivia walked down the aisle wearing a simple white dress, accompanied by Ethan in his first suit. In the front rows, Helena Caldwell, who had fallen, madly in love with her grandson as soon as she met him, cried with emotion. Marina was the maid of honor, and even some colleagues from Olivia's old company were present. Victor waited at the altar, more nervous than he had ever been in any business meeting. When Olivia reached his side, he whispered, "Thank you for giving me a second chance." "Thank you for being worth it," she replied. The priest began the ceremony, but Ethan interrupted him. "Father, am I going to have a real mommy and daddy now?" The entire church laughed, and the priest smiled. "Yes, my son. Now you have a complete family." "And little brothers too?" Ethan asked, making Victor and Olivia blush. "That's something you decide later," the priest replied diplomatically, causing more laughter. When they finally kissed as husband and wife, Victor murmured against Olivia's lips, "This time it's forever." "This time it's forever," she confirmed. And as they left the church under a shower of rose petals, with Ethan running ahead and Zeus barking with joy beside them, Victor knew that he had finally found what he had always been looking for without knowing it. Not a business empire, but a home. Not professional success, but personal happiness. Not the admiration of the world, but the love of a woman and a son that he had almost lost through cowardice. Sometimes second chances come when we least expect them, disguised as coincidences of fate. And sometimes all we need to do is be brave enough not to waste them again.